This is a love story told by an Eldritch deity that has been snorting bath salts. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome or welcome back to Reading from the Depths. My name is Licton. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I have another review for you. Today is a review of The Divine Flesh by Drew Huff. This is being published by Dark Matter Inc. in early March 2025, and I did receive a complimentary copy in exchange for an honest review. And let me tell you, this story is wild, okay? It is not for everyone. It is maximalist by design. The main story follows a young woman named Jen, who just happens to be possessed by an eldritch god named the Divine Flesh. He was born being possessed with the Divine Flesh, and they're constantly fighting over control of her meat sack, of her body. And so usually Jen is in control. She's figured out how to kind of tamp the Divine Flesh down, but she's not always successful. Now, meanwhile, she is still in love with her ex-husband, Daryl, but Daryl only loves the Divine Flesh. He's not as interested in Jen anymore. Now, the Divine Flesh, as an Eldritch deity, is really fascinating. She's really obsessed with spreading love, though her, idea of what it means to spread love is wildly different than what a human idea might be. And look, this story needs to have every content warning available, every trigger warning, everything. It is maximalist by design, and yet there is this touching story of acceptance and perseverance that is buried within this obscene, fleshy chaos. Look, the writing is visceral, okay? The writing sucks you in and it leaves you slicked with sweat and all sorts of other substances that you probably don't even want to know about. It really grabs you. The writing is intense and it works really well. And it moves really fast, back and forth. There are multiple POVs, and even across those multiple POVs, you have the Divine Flesh is able to communicate telepathically. So she is communicating telepathically to different characters. There is this constant movement in the text. It feels chaotic. It feels almost uncontrolled. It's full of twists and turns. It is feverish and disorienting, yet it never actually feels unintentional. Everything feels very purposeful. So if you're willing to take that ride, then it's a real fun ride. But you never really feel like you have control, or it's barely controlled chaos. Because the main plot of this is, Jen has been living with the Divine Flesh for her whole life. Both her and Daryl are really interesting characters. They're really these complicated messes. She is incredibly self-destructive. At this point, she is smuggling drugs for an interdimensional drug lord. In addition to being a drug mule, she, has spent a lot of time cooking drugs, doing drugs, harming herself, being basically self-destructive in every possible way. And Daryl is trying to move away from that life, right? That's why he eventually divorced her, even though he still loves the Divine Flesh. He is trying to gain custody of his siblings. So they're both these broken people that are trying to find their own humanity, and they're doing it through making mistakes over and over and over again. And pretty early on in the story, and this is explained in the jacket copy, so I'm not giving it away, the Divine Flesh and Jen manage to separate, which you think is a good thing, until you realize the Divine Flesh's goal is to take over the world and to assimilate everything into her being, because she wants to spread love. She wants to make creations, and so she can manipulate matter. And by manipulating matter, whether that be corpses or living humans, she manipulates them into these monsters, these gross monsters full of hearts and teeth and eyes and tentacles, and removes all their bones, so they're just these fleshy, pulsating masses. And for her, that is spreading love, and she wants to incorporate all beings into her. And what's phenomenal is, as an Eldritch deity, she doesn't understand human emotions, right? So she thinks she's actually doing a good thing. Why would you want to be separate from me if I can share my love with you? So what she is trying to do is unite the world, but by uniting it, she's taking away all will. She is taking away all of your independence and all of your identity and making you one with her. So once she actually separates from Jen, then Jen and Daryl need to team up to find a way to stop her. And how do two barely functioning humans stop an Eldritch deity? That's a good question. Meanwhile, in this small town in Idaho, there is a group of people that have already tried to murder Daryl, so he's barely alive. There's a serial killer who may or may not be kidnapping and torturing people. There is, like I said, an interdimensional drug smuggling operation that is secondary to the main plot. So there are all these things happening with our characters. Like I said, it is a maximalist story, both in content and in narrative. And yet it works. The writing, like I said, it is all over the place, but it's tight. It feels very intentional. The world building is wonderful. You have a real sense of small town, rural Idaho, which is where it takes place. And you can tell how that place affected those characters and how the characters came to be who they are due to how remote they are and to the environment they're in. In this world, you have this vision of what the world looks like from, the remains of a burnt out trailer in the middle of the woods to the street where all the different churches are lined up one after the other, Holy Row, as it's called. And this is all part of the environment. So Drew Huff, she manages to do a great job of creating a realistic world, even though you have this undeniably non-realistic character in the divine flesh who is taking over this world. And that creates a really great contrast between the events that are happening and locating you in a very specific place. In addition to having this really grounded world and setting and atmosphere, you have characters that you can connect with. So Jen and Daryl are the primary characters, and both of them are these like incredibly tragic people who have these complicated life stories, and they feel real. They feel like genuine characters, aside from the fact that they're dealing with an interdimensional drug lord and that they're dealing with, eldritch deities who are possessing their bodies. Take a step back from that for a moment. They both have these traumatic pasts, which to some extent they've managed to overcome, but not all the way. And now they're at a point in their lives, and they're both in their early 20s. They're young characters still. And Daryl is trying to kind of go straight, and Jennifer can't seem to do it. Everything Jennifer seems to do seems to be more and more self-destructive, in part because she is living with this eldritch being in her that is constantly possessing her mind. And so this idea of numbing herself is all she can do to get through the day. We can look at this idea of how we're constantly bombarded by things outside of ourselves to try to find our humanity. Sometimes the world is so chaotic, all we can do is numb ourselves. We don't have any good options open, right? All of our options are filled with pain or misery. So what do we do? How do we get out of that? That is the struggle that Jennifer is making, and she's making all the wrong decisions. But what are the right decisions in her case? So as a result of that, these two characters, I think, are like incredibly human, and they are really, really relatable, and they feel well-rounded. There's a number of ancillary characters, and none of them are as robust, right? But they feel like they fit into this place really well. They're part of the world building in a meaningful way. So all of the ancillary characters fill a role, and they feel legitimate. And then, of course, you have the divine flesh. You have her both as a telepathic entity communicating with everyone else. You have her when she is possessing Jennifer's body. You have her when she has escaped from Jennifer's body and is taking over the world. And, it's a really incredible depiction of a eldritch deity. You see, eldritch gods in lots of cosmic horror, right? But you never get inside their minds. And part of it is because what could the mind of a being like that, a being that creates dimensions out of whole cloth, that has existed throughout time immemorial in a way that human minds cannot conceive, what would they think like? And getting in her mind is actually really effective. She has almost this childish, single-pointed focus, which is all about, again, spreading love. But for her, spreading love is taking over the world, of recreating the world in her image, an image that is grotesque and is full of pulsating body parts. She loves to put mouths on things, so every body part will just have lots and lots of mouths and then showing up. Whenever she takes over Jennifer's body so she can be intimate with Daryl, she always says she shows him her favorite smile with 108 teeth. Like, everything is over the top because she has no ability to conceive what humans value as important, how human emotion works, or how humans understand themselves in the world. So she thinks she is offering something that is so magnificent, so beneficial. Why could anyone ever turn her down? So as an eldritch deity, she doesn't have the capacity to understand the significance of human life, which is portrayed like in a really exciting and fresh way, in a way that you wouldn't expect it to be. She is very sassy. She talks back. Like I said, she's almost childish in the way she focuses on things and the way she talks. And like she has you can hear like a whine to her voice almost. And this contradiction between being the most powerful entity in existence, at least that we know of, and like being whiny and needy and childish and like giggling all the time is like really, really amusing. I think it works really well, especially because, for her, being childish and like pulling a little joke means taking corpses and stitching them together into these like abominations, right? So her idea of what is a fun joke and what is, exciting and enjoyable doesn't compute with human rationality in any meaningful way. So I just think it works really well. I think it is like a depiction of cosmic power that I've never seen before, and it really pulled me in. Look, this story is unhinged. It has this unhinged quality, and it works. Now, there is like a secondary plot line of this like interdimensional drug smuggler, or this drug smuggling operation that Jen is part of, that she's found herself like wrapped up in. And maybe it's not necessary, yet it still manages to fit together. So all of these like fleshy, meaty, gross appendages fit together as like part of this like pulsating puzzle, and it works. Now it is maximalist, and there are parts that aren't necessary. There's storylines, there are characters that are left dangling a little bit that it could be tightened up. There are things that you could cut out to leave it being extreme and graphic and over the top and yet be a little more impactful, I think. So this isn't a perfect story. It is scattershot all over the place, but at the same time it works. So even though it isn't perfect, I think that if you let yourself be immersed in this gross, sticky world, there is a lot of benefit there. Now look, there is graphic sex, violence, and torture, and I wouldn't call this extreme horror, though you wouldn't really be that far off by calling it extreme horror. I don't think it ever depicts anything just for the sake of shocking you. Like it's not shock value alone. There's like meaning to all this chaos, like internal meaning at least, or internal cohesion, but it is chaotic and it is over the top and it is not for everyone. It'll definitely turn your stomach, but it is doing all that to ask a lot of important questions. I think one of them is about consent, also questions about power and authority, questions about love and identity and redemption, and what it means to find your humanity even though you've done awful things. In addition to that, like, what does it mean to be your best self? How do you understand or find who your best self is when your whole life is filled with tragedy and mistakes and literal dead bodies all over the place? So there is this constant struggle at the heart of this story that is profound, and you have to wade through a lot of body fluids to get there, but it's there. It's definitely the beating heart, or maybe the beating hearts of this story. Yet at the same time, even though it's asking about these really important questions like consent, like power, like authority, like domination, it never feels like it's preaching. Anytime it feels like it makes a meaningful point, it then sabotages that point. So this story is not interested in telling you what you should think about any of these topics. It is interested in opening up dialogue or a conversation and asking questions about what it looks like to have domination over another person, what consent looks like when there are power differentials that are so extreme you can't fathom them. What does love look like when the way you realize or enact your love is through making bad decision after bad decision? So the story isn't interested in giving you any answers. It isn't interested in preaching to you, but it is definitely interested in a lot of really, really heavy topics, a lot of emotionally heavy topics, and it explores those topics through graphic, over the top, almost cartoon violence. But then that is paired with real human suffering. Like I said, it isn't an easy read if you are squeamish, and it isn't an easy read if you're sensitive to some of these topics. The shortest thing to say is that this story is a mess. It is a glorious, disgusting mess. And yes, there are plot points and ideas that aren't as satisfying as they could be because they're a little bit loose. And even though it's a maximalist style, there are things that could be tightened up to make it more impactful. Like, that is true. And yet at the same time, nothing feels like it is done just for shock value. Every mutilated corpse and every moist appendage that is filled with chittering mouths makes sense in this world. And all of the world's different grotesqueries, they fit together. And look, it is a lot. And I totally understand that some might think whatever this destination is definitely not worth the journey. And that makes sense. Like, this isn't for everyone. I can't fault you for that. But for me, all of this graphic imagery and this over-the-top insanity, it made for a largely introspective experience. And it was an experience that grabbed me with all of its sticky tentacles, and it didn't let me go. So that is The Divine Flesh. It is a fever dream that is high on drugs that is not going to let you go. It's going to fill your mind with graphic images that you want to get out of your mind, and they just won't leave. And yet, those graphic images come with a lot of interesting introspection, and that also stays with you for a long time. So I had a lot of fun with this. It was insane. It was wild and insane. I had a great time. Not for everyone, but if any of this sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend you pick it up. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. I think that's all I have to say. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think this kind of thing fits into extreme horror just because it's graphic? I'd also love to know if you have any recommendations for other stories that focus on kind of cosmic or eldritch deities living human lives, and what that disconnect is between that insane level of power and how that is realized in human form. If you have any suggestions that also play with that idea the way the Divine Flesh does, I'd love to hear it. For now, though, I'll say thank you for spending some time with me today. I appreciate you. Please be kind to yourselves. Take care of each other, and go slowly.